Hello, good morning. This is our heart healthy nutrition class. That was my cat's tail. We're in our new house and we're still trying to figure out, so I'm hoping the cat doesn't interrupt us. Yeah. My name is Melissa. I'm HealthAware's registered dietitian and personal trainer. As I said, this is our online heart healthy nutrition class. Today, might be a little shorter, we'll see. But our topic today is myths and truths as it relates to heart healthy nutrition. So I have 4 different myths that I'm going to talk through and kind of give you the truth about each one. So our first one, by the way, please feel free to type in any comments or questions that you may have as we go throughout this class, whether you're watching live or the recorded version. I can see those live or later on if you type them in, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Our first myth, number 1, is coconut oil is a heart healthy alternative. That is the myth. Coconut oil is very high in saturated fat and has been shown to increase cholesterol levels, okay? Coconut oil in the last year or two, a couple years ago, it was very, very popular. Coconut oil is good for everything. It cures everything. Put 2 tablespoons in your coffee every morning and miraculously you'll lose 1,000 pounds. So coconut oil, what it comes down to is that coconut oil contains primarily saturated fat, and that can increase our cholesterol levels. But, however, the saturated fat in coconut oil is slightly different than the saturated fat that is in animal-based foods. So it's actually medium chain triglycerides, not to get too sciencey, but the saturated fat that is in coconut oil, some of it is medium chain triglycerides, and the body reacts differently to those slightly than with the type of saturated fat that's in animal-based products. So with coconut oil, that type of saturated fat, it actually can raise both the bad and the good cholesterol levels, whereas the animal-based type of saturated fat raises just the bad cholesterol, okay? So to avoid raising the bad cholesterol, I recommend not choosing coconut oil as your primary oil if you're cooking or baking, whatever with it. I do not recommend using coconut oil as the only one. I recommend using more heart healthy oils instead. So extra virgin olive oil is supposed to be one of the best oils for us. Not that I want people eating a lot of oil, but if you're going to be using oil, which most people do, extra virgin olive oil is a good choice. That is better for stuff that you're not cooking at a high temperature. So even just fresh preparations, salad dressings and dips, you can saute in it as long as you're not doing like deep frying. I don't recommend. And then if you're doing a high heat preparation for baking, cooking, frying, that sort of thing, I recommend using avocado oil. That is another healthy oil alternative. Well, healthy oil. One of the healthier oil alternatives if you're going to be using an oil, okay? Less coconut oil and more extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil if you are going to use oil. So that's our first myth. The second myth, it's kind of 2 parts. The first part of the myth is that eggs should be completely avoided. That is a myth. And also that eggs are completely fine to eat. That's also kind of a myth too. So the truth is that egg yolks contain high amounts of cholesterol and the egg whites contain none. So egg yolks, when people are talking about, oh, you need to avoid all eggs, we're not really talking about actually the whole egg. It's the egg yolk that we're really talking about is the problem, I guess we'll say. Research has shown that the cholesterol levels in the blood are more impacted by the fat that we eat, actually, primarily saturated fat and trans fat, than by the cholesterol that we eat. So the yolk is where all the cholesterol is, but that's not a free pass to eat as many eggs as you want, because eggs do contain saturated fat. The yolks contain saturated fat. The egg whites contain basically just protein. That's pretty much all they are. So egg whites, that's why egg white omelets, that sort of thing, is on heart healthy menus in restaurants, is because they don't contain saturated fat or any fat or cholesterol. So egg yolks do contain saturated fat. One large egg yolk, that's the typical size of egg. One large egg yolk provides approximately 10% of the recommended maximum that someone should eat in a day of saturated fat. If you were eating a 2,000 calorie diet, the recommended saturated fat intake is 13 grams or less. Ideally, as close to 0 as possible. We don't want people eating saturated fat, but we have kind of a limit to where it's acceptable, all right? With all this in mind about eggs, it is important to note that long-term studies have shown that eating one whole egg per day has not been linked to increased rate of heart attack or stroke. That's good news. There has been a lot of kind of like back and forth research in the last few years about eggs. So one day you hear they're bad, one day you hear they're good. That's the most recent research that I have right now. However, it is also important to note that you should look at your overall diet. Just one egg per day, no matter what you're eating, it does matter the rest of what you're eating when we're looking at risk for heart attack and stroke. So do I recommend that people eat eggs every day? Probably one egg a day is not the end of the world. However, it does matter what else you're eating. If you're having steak and bacon and butter at every meal, then probably another egg, it's not helping you at all, but we need to look at the rest of your diet. Myth number 3, if you don't use a salt shaker, your intake of sodium is low. That is a myth. I get a lot of people that tell me, oh, I don't eat a lot of salt. I don't really salt my food. I don't use a salt shaker at the table, but that's not really where most of our sodium actually comes from for a lot of the time. Most Americans consume almost double the recommended amount of sodium each day. The recommended amount is about 2,300 milligrams per day. If you have high blood pressure, it is lower than that. It is usually 2,000 milligrams per day, or often 1,500 milligrams per day. But just a typical American, no high blood pressure, no major medical conditions, 2,300 milligrams is the recommended amount-ish of sodium to stay below per day. To put that kind of in food terms, 1 teaspoon of table salt contains 2,300 milligrams. So that's 1 teaspoon. That would be your whole day of salt. Usually we're not using an entire teaspoon of salt in what we're eating, but usually we're not getting all of our sodium from that shaker. In general, most of our salt doesn't come from that salt shaker. It comes from other products that are processed foods, like canned soup, lunch meat, cheese, frozen meals, fast food or takeout from restaurants these days. It's more so from those prepared foods, the ones that are already made for us, processed, packaged, have preservatives. Salt is used as a preservative, so things that have longer shelf life tend to have higher amounts of salt in them. When grocery shopping, I recommend choosing products that label that have reduced sodium. You have to watch those a little bit though. You need to look at the sodium on the back of the package. But reduced sodium or no salt or no sodium added foods when possible, to keep your salt intake minimized or more managed. It's easy. It is very easy to eat less than 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day, as long as you're eating whole foods, things that are not processed, fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, beans, seeds, things that aren't overly salted. So not salted nuts or regular cans of beans that have salt in them. It is easy to eat less than the recommended amount of sodium. So that's our third myth. Then our fourth and final myth for today is that a low-fat diet is a heart-healthy diet. That is a myth as far as we're concerned. A diet low in saturated fat, which we've talked about several times today, a diet low in saturated fat is good and it's healthy for our heart. Low saturated fat. But a diet low in total fat is not necessarily a heart healthy one. There are types of fats that are actually good for our heart. There are some that are protective for our heart against heart disease. When eaten in moderation, monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats can help lower your bad cholesterol, so that's the LDL. They help lower that and increase our good cholesterol, also called the HDL cholesterol. So some sources of monounsaturated fat, one of the good ones, would be olives, olive oil, almonds, avocados, and then some sources of the polyunsaturated fats would be walnuts, sunflower seeds, and salmon, the fatty fish. In general, the healthy fats are found in plant foods. Kind of the fatty fish is sort of the exception, and I recommend leaning more towards a plant-based type of diet. So I recommend less of the fatty fish and more of the nuts and seeds and avocado, flaxseed, that sort of stuff to get those healthy fats. We do need a certain amount of fat in our diet to make our bodies their most healthy, but low in the saturated fat. That's all the myths that I have for today. I did tell you the class might be a little bit shorter today, but something a little more fun, talking about the myths and the truths. Let me know if you have any questions about any of the things that we talked about or any other myths maybe you've heard about heart health. I would love to hear if you have any questions or myths that you want kind of talked about. Let me know if there's any specific heart healthy topic you'd like to hear about next month. This class is every month on the first Wednesday. Next week we have our Carb Smart class. Feel free to let me know any feedback. Oh, how about someone has a question? I love when you guys have questions. It's great. Makes me feel like I'm not just talking to myself on a screen. How about peanut butter? Okay, so an option for like a heart healthy peanut butter, perhaps, I'm assuming is what you're asking. Yep. So there are so many brands of peanut butter, so many types of peanut butter these days. Skippy, I know that like Skippy and Jif, those brands may have a more natural type of brand, a more natural variety these days. They kind of have the regulars and then they have like natural Skippy or that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily the brand that's the problem. And Skippy isn't necessarily a problem. I don't know the nutrition facts of it off the top of my head, but whatever peanut butter or nut butter in general, but peanut butter specifically that you're looking at, look at the label on the back and look at the ingredients. So ingredients are where we can kind of investigate to find if there is anything bad, I guess we'll call it, in them. Let me get an example for you. Don't go anywhere. I'm gonna grab my peanut butter. All right, that was quick. I'm right next to my kitchen. So peanut butter. This is a Trader Joe's peanut butter. And when we look on the label, you can see that, there we go, a little bit blurry. The only ingredients in here are, my goodness, that's really blurry, roasted peanuts and salt, okay? Only 2 ingredients. So a lot of the times a peanut butter will have palm oil or sugar added into it. Sometimes both, one or the other sometimes. So you want to look for any peanut butters that have sugar in their ingredients or palm oil. You don't want to have either of those ingredients in your peanut butter. The only thing you need in peanut butter is peanuts and salt, because let's be honest, unsalted peanut butter doesn't taste very good. And there's not, if you have high sodium, then yes, you should probably, or high blood pressure, then yes, you should probably try to find a peanut butter that doesn't have salt, which exists pretty much at every store. As far as the fats are concerned, no palm oil. Don't have any. Stirring is a pain though. Yes, but also so is having a heart attack. That's a little extreme. But this brand of peanut butter, the Trader Joe's one, there we go. This brand of peanut butter I find to be pretty good. You have to stir it initially, and that is a pain, I will say. Initially, you have to stir it. After that, there's not a lot more stirring that you usually have to do with this particular one. Yeah, I would say it is worth it to buy a peanut butter that doesn't contain sugar or palm oil in it, and get just the peanuts and the salt in the peanut butter. Same story for almond butter or cashew butter or sunflower seed butter, whatever other types. Almond butter will often add sugar or palm oil to it as well. And yes, that does make it much more stirrable at first. I would say, yes, it is worth it though. Any other questions, heart health related? I will give you another moment to type anything in. I am happy to hear any questions. I will give you, oh, I found one with only peanuts. Oh, see, there you go. Yeah, so some peanut butters, like I said, they don't even contain salt. It'll just be the peanuts, and that's great too. If you're eating peanut butter with something else, like in a sandwich or, I mean, even like with oatmeal or in a smoothie, that sort of thing, you'll find that you don't need to have the sodium in it necessarily. And I will say, the more you get used to eating low sodium foods, the more you eat them, the more your taste buds adapt and get used to it. So yeah, eating it with apples, that's a great option for eating peanut butter. And if you're not, like I said, if you're not used to eating peanut butter that doesn't have salt in it, it might taste a little funny to you at first, or not taste like much at first. But the more you get used to that, the more you do it, the taste buds do adapt to lower sodium foods. So just give it a week or two and you will be able to adapt. Any other questions? I do love nut butter, so I love talking about that. It's a great topic. Any other questions for me for today's class related to heart healthy nutrition? Let me know. Or if you have any recommendations or requests for next month's heart healthy class, I love hearing what you guys want to know about. I'll give you a few more seconds to type in any questions. I'll give you 10 seconds. How's that? And then we'll end the class. Oh, I can't count with that finger. You have 5 seconds left to type in anything you want. Questions? The live version? Yes, oils, please. So next class, maybe we should talk about oils. Let's do it. Next month, we'll talk about oils for our topic. We can kind of go through the different types of oils, say which ones are good and which ones are less good. That is perfect. Thank you, Claudia, for that recommendation. I think that's a great topic. I'm happy to talk about that. All right, until next month, we'll be talking about oils next month. I will see you all tomorrow when you come exercise with me for the online strength training class, right? All right. Have a wonderful Wednesday, everybody. I'll see you next month for this, tomorrow for our other class. Bye.